Hey guys, how's it going? Hope you're doing well. My name is Crown, and today I'm going to read you some very interesting stories that I hope that you're gonna love. And now, without further ado, let's go!
I've been working in information technology for about 5 years now. Nothing fancy, just a mid-sized company where I handle coding, bug fixes, and occasional system updates. The pay is decent, the hours are reasonable, and I actually like my co-workers. Well, most of them anyway. My cubicle neighbor and I have been friends since day one. We both started around the same time and got along great. We had this system where we'd help each other out when one of us got stuck, trading tips and shortcuts that made our work go smoothly. Our department manager, I'll call her Karen, started about 2 years ago. At first, things were okay. She had her quirks, sure. She liked detailed documentation, fair enough, and insisted we use her specific email templates, annoying but whatever. She micromanaged a bit, but nothing we couldn't handle. Then came the new policy. Karen called a department meeting on a Monday morning and announced her brilliant new productivity strategy with this smug look on her face like she'd just solved world hunger. She told us that from now on, everyone would work on only one task at a time and we had to complete it fully before moving to the next ticket. She emphasized there would be no exceptions. My friend and I exchanged looks. This made no sense for information technology work. Our job literally requires jumping between tasks sometimes. I asked what we should do when waiting for client feedback or running tests, wondering if we could work on something else during those times. Karen rejected this idea, insisting we focus on the assigned task until completion, period. She claimed studies showed multitasking reduces efficiency. My friend tried to explain that this was different from what we were talking about. He pointed out that if he was waiting an hour for code to compile or for a client to respond, he couldn't just sit there doing nothing. Karen dismissed our concerns, saying we were overthinking things and that it was simple, one task at a time. She then asked if there were any other questions. Nobody said anything. What was the point? After the meeting, my friend came to my desk. He predicted this would be a disaster. I suggested maybe Karen would realize once she saw how it worked in practice. He told me I was way too optimistic. He was right. By the end of the first week, our ticketing system was backing up badly. I spent 3 hours one day literally staring at my screen waiting for a client to approve a change before I could continue. My friend had it worse. He was stuck on a database migration that needed overnight processing, but wasn't allowed to touch any other work while it ran. We tried explaining again. I told Karen we had a problem with tickets piling up because of wait times. My friend added that he had 5 urgent requests. He couldn't even start because he was waiting on a migration. Karen said we just weren't adapting well to the new system. She acknowledged change was hard but insisted this was how we were doing things now. I mentioned that clients were getting frustrated with someone from marketing calling me directly because their ticket had been sitting for 3 days. Karen dismissed this as a temporary adjustment period and told us to stay the course, bragging that she had studied productivity frameworks extensively. It was clear she wasn't going to budge. So we looked at each other and silently agreed to malicious compliance. We followed her rule to the letter. One task at a time, no exceptions. When my database query needed 20 minutes to run, I just sat there. When my friend was waiting for a vendor to email back, he took a long coffee break. When we needed approval from another department, we'd just refresh our email every 5 minutes. The backlog exploded within days. Clients were furious. Other departments started complaining to upper management. Our ticketing system metrics looked catastrophic. 2 weeks in, our director from 3 levels up started asking questions. He stopped by my desk and mentioned he noticed the resolution times had nearly tripled this month. He asked if I had any idea what was happening. I explained I was just following the new one task at a time policy and offered to show him how it worked. I pulled up my screen showing a test running with a timer counting down from 45 minutes and explained that I would just wait there until it finished since I couldn't start anything else. The director frowned, asked a few more questions, and left. The next day, Karen got called into a long meeting with HR and the director. She came back, grabbed her purse without saying a word, and left early. The following morning, we all got an email from Human Resources announcing Karen's departure to pursue other opportunities and introducing our interim manager. The new manager called us together that afternoon. He explained he had been briefed on what happened and suggested we go back to working how we used to. My friend asked for clarification, wondering if we could multitask when appropriate. The new manager said he didn't care how many things we were juggling as long as deadlines were met. I expressed relief and my friend agreed. 2 weeks later, our backlog was cleared, clients were happy again, and we could actually do our jobs properly. It all started when my therapist suggested getting a pet to help with my anxiety after my divorce. Dogs seemed like too much work with my long hours at the hospital. I'm a nurse, and cats trigger my allergies. So I settled on a rabbit. Little did I know I'd fall in love with these fluffy creatures. What started as one rabbit named Thumper turned into a small hobby farm with 6 rabbits in a beautiful custom hutch in my backyard. I spent thousands building them a spacious, clean enclosure that I maintained meticulously. My backyard wasn't huge, but it was mine and my rabbits were happy. The trouble started when the woman next door sold her house. The new neighbor moved in about 6 months ago. From day one, she made it clear she didn't approve of my rodent collection, as she called it. I tried explaining they were actually lagomorphs, not rodents, but she just rolled her eyes. Our first real conversation happened when she approached me in the yard. She told me that my animals were an eyesore. I defended my rabbits, explaining they were in a clean, well-maintained hutch at the back of my property. She complained that she could see them from her kitchen window and that she didn't pay good money for her house to look at farm animals all day. When I tried to explain they were properly housed pets, not farm animals, she threatened me by saying she was now on the Homeowners Association board and would be looking into whether rabbits were even allowed. She stormed off before I could respond. I checked our neighborhood bylaws that day. There was nothing prohibiting small pet rabbits kept in outdoor hutches as long as they were properly maintained. I even called the HOA president to confirm, who told me I wasn't breaking any rules. Things escalated over the next few weeks. The neighbor would stand at our shared fence taking pictures of my rabbits. She'd make loud comments when I was outside about the smell and how the property values were surely dropping because of my petting zoo. Then one Saturday morning, I caught her reaching over the fence with something in her hand. I ran outside and asked her what she was doing. She pretended innocence, claiming she was just checking if they had enough water because it was hot that day. When I accused her of putting something in their water, which I had clearly seen, she dismissed my concerns as ridiculous and asked why she would do such a thing. But when I checked the water, it had a strange smell. I immediately dumped it out and refilled it with clean water. That night, I installed a security camera pointed at the hutch. The very next day, the camera caught her spraying something through the fence toward the rabbit enclosure. When I confronted her, she claimed she was just spraying for weeds on her side. When I told her that the camera showed her deliberately spraying toward my rabbits, she made excuses about the rabbits attracting pests, and that she was just protecting her property. I warned her to stay away from my rabbits and property or I'd call the police. She replied that I would have trouble proving anything and threatened that the HOA would hear about my hostile behavior. I took the footage to the police, who gave her a warning but said they couldn't do much without proof that she had actually poisoned them. The officer suggested I move the hutch to another part of the yard, but I didn't have anywhere else suitable that would get the right amount of shade and protection. 2 days later, my youngest rabbit got sick. The vet couldn't definitely say it was poisoning, but mentioned the symptoms were consistent with toxic exposure. Thankfully, he recovered after treatment, but I was furious. I built a tall privacy screen around the hutch area and added more cameras. The neighbor then started filing daily complaints with the HOA about everything from the height of my grass to the color of my mailbox. It was clear she had a vendetta. The breaking point came when she stood in her driveway and told another neighbor that my disease-ridden rodents were a health hazard, and she was going to make sure they were removed one way or another. That's when I learned from another neighbor that she was leaving for a 2-week cruise. The perfect opportunity for some petty revenge presented itself. The night after she left, I bought 24 rolls of toilet paper. At about 2 a.m., I gave her house the toilet paper treatment of a lifetime. Every tree, bush, porch railing, and mailbox was draped in white streamers. I even managed to get some on her roof using a long garden tool. When morning came, several neighbors saw the masterpiece. I was nervous someone would report me, but to my surprise, one of them actually laughed and gave me a thumbs up. Another neighbor told me it was about time someone stood up to her because she'd been making everyone's life miserable with her constant complaints. A different neighbor mentioned that she had reported his kid's basketball hoop the previous month, claiming it was unsightly. It turned out she had managed to antagonize pretty much everyone on the block in the 6 months she'd lived there. Nobody called to tell her about the toilet paper, and nobody cleaned it up. A mild rain shower a few days later made the toilet paper even more of a mess as it started to disintegrate and stick to everything. When she returned from her cruise to find her house still partially covered in soggy toilet paper, she was livid. She drove up and down the street screaming that she would find out who did it and have them arrested. Not a single neighbor admitted to seeing anything. The next day, she confronted me directly, accusing me of the toilet paper prank and saying I was just upset because she reported my rabbits. I denied any knowledge of it and told her I had been working night shifts that week. She didn't believe me and warned that the neighborhood had gone to hell, and we would all regret this. 2 weeks later, a for sale sign appeared in her yard. I overheard her real estate agent suggesting she might need to lower the asking price due to the current market conditions. Within a month, she sold the house for notably less than she had paid 6 months earlier and moved away. The new neighbors are a lovely young couple who actually came over to admire my rabbits the day they moved in. They even bring their kids over sometimes to pet them. I've always been a huge Aerosmith fan. My 2 cousins and I practically grew up listening to Dream On and Sweet Emotion on repeat in our parents' basements. So when we heard they were coming to our city for a concert in 2007, we immediately bought tickets. We've been counting down the days for months, listening to all their albums and watching old concert footage online. The day finally arrived and we got to the venue super early. We wanted to soak in every minute of the experience, maybe catch a glimpse of the band arriving, and definitely get some merch before the crowds got too crazy. My cousins went to claim our seats while I made a quick trip to the bathroom. As I was walking out of the bathroom, this big guy in a black t-shirt with security printed across the back came rushing toward me. He looked panicked. He told me I was late and explained that the band needed me to go get them at the hotel and help escort them to the limo. I opened my mouth to tell him he had the wrong person, but before I could get any words out, he shoved a security badge into my hand and started pushing me toward the exit. He urged me to hurry, saying we couldn't keep Aerosmith waiting and that the limo was outside. Everything happened so fast. 1 minute I was heading back to my cousins, the next I was sitting in a fancy limo heading to the hotel where Aerosmith was staying. I kept looking down at the security badge in my hands, trying to figure out what to do. Should I tell the driver? Would I get in trouble for impersonating security staff? Before I could decide, we pulled up to this fancy hotel. The driver turned to me and asked what I was waiting for, telling me to go get them. I stumbled out of the limo and walked into the hotel lobby. My heart was pounding so hard I thought it might burst out of my chest. I approached the front desk and awkwardly asked for Aerosmith while showing them my security badge. The receptionist made a quick call, and a few minutes later the elevator doors opened and there they were, the Aerosmith. Steven Tyler, Joe Perry, and the whole band walked toward me like it was the most normal thing in the world. Steven Tyler asked if I was the security guy. I froze. This was my chance to come clean. I explained the mix-up, telling them I wasn't security but just a fan who was at the concert venue, and that someone had mistaken me for the backup security guy, given me the badge, and sent me in the limo. I expected them to be angry or call a real security, but instead, they all started laughing. Joe Perry said it was the best thing he'd heard all tour, and Steven Tyler was amused that some random person at their concert got mistaken for security and sent to escort them, calling it rock and roll. They were all cracking up as we got into the limo. They asked me about myself, how long I've been a fan, and what songs I wanted to hear that night. Steven Tyler thanked me for my honesty pointing out that most people would have played along for the whole night. He offered to treat me and whoever I came with to dinner after the show. He reached into his pocket and handed me 3 backstage passes. Joe Perry told me to consider myself their special guest for the night. When we got back to the venue, I could see the head of security losing it on the guy who'd mistaken me for one of his team. The head security guy was yelling, demanding to know how he could have sent a random fan to pick up Aerosmith and asking if he was trying to get fired. I slipped past them, using the crowd as cover, and made my way back to my cousins. They were starting to worry about where I'd disappeared to. They asked where I'd been, pointing out that the show was about to start. I told them I had just ridden in a limo with Aerosmith. My cousins didn't believe me until I showed them the backstage passes. Their jaws dropped. The concert was amazing. Aerosmith played all our favorite songs, and every time Steven Tyler came to our side of the stage, he'd point at me and grin. After the show, we used our backstage passes and were taken to a private room where the band was hanging out. Steven Tyler greeted us by calling me their fake security guard and inviting us in. We had dinner with the band, talking and laughing like old friends. They signed my concert t-shirt, took photos with us, and even gave us a ride back to my cousin's place in their limo. Now that concert t-shirt is framed on my wall, along with my ticket, backstage pass, and a copy of the photo of Aerosmith with me and my cousins. Whenever people come over, they ask about it, and I get to tell them about the day a case of mistaken identity led to one of the best nights of my life. It's funny how one small mix-up changed everything. If that security guard hadn't confused me for someone else, I would have just had a regular concert experience. Instead, I got a story I'll be telling for the rest of my life. I work at a pizza chain. Before COVID hit, the job was pretty straightforward: take orders, making pizzas, handle the occasional difficult customer. Nothing I couldn't handle. I'd worked my way up to shift manager, which meant more responsibility but also slightly better pay. Not much, but enough to help cover my community college classes. Then the pandemic arrived, and everything changed overnight. Our corporate office sent down strict protocols: close the lobby, take orders by phone only, and implement contactless delivery. Simple enough, right? We even put up this massive sign on our front door, bold red letters that you couldn't possibly miss, explaining that the lobby was closed and customers needed to call us for orders or pickups. Problem solved? Not even close. It turns out that a surprising number of people believe signs apply to everyone except them. Every day, despite the giant notice staring them in the face, customers would read the sign and walk right in anyway. Some would even nod at it before pushing through the door. It was like watching people deliberately ignore a wet floor sign and then act shocked when they slipped. That's when I discovered my secret weapon. During those first chaotic weeks, supplies were scarce everywhere. Hand sanitizer had disappeared from shelves faster than toilet paper, but the Dollar Tree across town somehow had a few bottles left. These off-brand containers filled with what I can only describe as liquid punishment. This sanitizer smelled like someone had collected sweaty gym socks, mixed them with burning rubber, and then added a hint of skunk for good measure. It was horrendous, but it worked. And since we needed hand sanitizer and couldn't be picky, I bought several bottles for our shop. That's when I noticed something interesting. Every time a customer ignored our sign and strolled in, I'd politely direct them to the sanitizer station I'd set up right by the door. And like clockwork, after rubbing it on their hands, they'd automatically lift their fingers to their nose for a sniff. A customer would walk in and start to tell me they wanted to order a large pepperoni. Then they'd notice the sanitizer and apply it. After an involuntary sniff, they'd react with horror, asking what that terrible smell was. I would explain that it was our complimentary hand sanitizer for their safety. They would complain that it smelled like dead animals, and I would agree while reminding them that, as a sign outside indicated, our lobby was currently closed and they needed to call in their order from their car. The best part was watching them try to maintain their composure while fighting the urge to gag. They'd be mid-sentence ordering their pizza when the smell would hit them again. They'd pause, make a face like they'd just tasted something rotten, and then try to continue as if nothing happened. Even better were those who asked to use our bathroom. They would beg to use our restroom to wash the smell off, and I would apologize and explain that for safety reasons, our restrooms were closed to the public during the pandemic. They would protest that the smell was unbearable, and I would agree that it was quite strong before reminding them they could place their order by calling us from their car as the sign indicated. The look of horror when they realized they were stuck with that smell on their hands, possibly until they got home, was a perfect combination of karma and instant justice. One afternoon, this woman, let's call her Karen because she definitely earned the title, stormed in despite my coworker pointing at the sign. She demanded to place an order right away. When I started to explain about the lobby being closed, she cut me off and said she didn't have time for that because she had kids waiting in the car. I told her I understood but explained that for everyone's safety, we were only taking phone orders. She insisted this was ridiculous since she was already inside the store. I asked her to use some hand sanitizer before we continued. She grudgingly agreed and aggressively pumped the sanitizer onto her hands. After the automatic sniff, she started coughing dramatically and accused us of trying to poison customers. I told her it was FDA-approved hand sanitizer. She demanded to speak to the manager, and I had to explain that I was the shift manager and our policy remained the same. She needed to call from her vehicle. She complained that this was outrageous, and now her hands smelled disgusting. When I added that the bathroom was closed too, her face showed pure defeat. She stormed out, but I could see her through the window, wiping her hands on her pants as she got back into her car. I like to imagine her driving home, windows down in freezing weather, desperately trying to air out her hands before eating her pizza. And maybe she started reading signs more carefully after that. And now we have reached the end of today's stories. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.